And so I started prostituting with my choir member at 15 years old. The church being the hospital, there are some sick people, and I ran into one. And so 5 days later, I turned 14. I ran away from home and ended up meeting another pimp. But he wasn't trying to pimp me at that time. He was trying to help me. But he was like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. He sold drugs and he would get high on his own supply. And so when he was sober, he was so nice to me. He was really cool when he was sober. But then when he would get high, he wanted to beat me. He would beat me so bad because I didn't want to have sex. So he would beat me. There was a young lady who would buy drugs from him once a week, and she was a stripper. And one day she came to the house and she saw me all, beat up and stuff. And she said something to me. She said, you don't have to take this. You can make your own money. You can come to the club with me. And some people be like, how would a grown woman tell a little girl to come to the club? I think for her, she thought she was helping me. She was helping me out of a domestic situation because he was beating my tail, So she was like, girl, you ain't got to take this. And so in a sense, she thought she was helping me. But in reality, she opened up Pandora's box, And so in LA, I got me a fake ID and I started stripping at 14 years old.
Wow. Ooh, real quick, I got to tell you about the podcast calculator. It gives you a realistic estimate of the kind of money you could make if you started a podcast today. It's completely free, and the link is around here somewhere. Description box, comment section, wherever you're watching, it's there. Check it out. All right, back to the video.
Yeah. Wow. I got in that strip club. It was like, hey, wait, wow, what's going on in here? I didn't know, I young, I was 14. And so, you think of a strip club, you think of just dancing in lingerie. You don't really know what's going on. Absolutely not. And so once I got in the strip club at 14, I realized how much of a little girl I really was. There was some things that were going on beyond just dancing. And I wasn't necessarily prepared or ready for that. The pimps in the club, the men who was like, okay, the dancing is just an appetizer. Let's go. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, I felt like Ebony from Players Club. I just came to dance for y'all. You know what I'm saying? I ain't come here do all this. I came to dance. And they was like, dance, girl, And so I was like, yeah. It's too much going on. So I thank God for praying grandparents because when I left the club, I couldn't go back to my dad. I didn't want to go back to my mom. So I had grandparents. And they are Southern Baptists from Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, you was in church.
Oh, I was in church. And if you was going to be in their house, that was the rule. Forget washing dishes. You had to go to church. And so they was like, yeah, come on, but you're going to go to church. And I was in church. I felt like I was in church every day. I felt like it was just school and church and just church. But when I was with my grandparents, I got back in school. I got me a summer job. I was in church. I got back on the right path, did a 180 completely. Got back into my little girl mindset. I joined the choir while I was in the church, the youth choir, and, you start befriending the people at your church, your spiritual brothers and sisters, all of the things. And I was 15, and I ended up becoming very fond of a young lady who was in my choir. She was about 18, and we were singing for Jesus. We were just singing and singing and singing. And one day she pulled me to the side and she said, I know you used to dance. And I'm trying to figure out how you know I used to dance. Who told you? My grandma back there running her mouth. Old folks be gossiping. I'm like, did my grandma tell your mama and your mama told you? I'm like, how did you know? But she knew that I had danced and she was like, don't worry. I'm not judging you. I dance too. As a matter of fact, I'm still dancing. And I got my own place and I'm doing this and doing that. Won't you come live with me and we could dance together? We just got out of choir rehearsal. And so I'm like, I felt to say, it's something about when that's why people talk about church hurt, because when you come into church, it's like you hold people to a certain standard and you look at people who have titles and positions and that's in the church as people that should be above. But that's not always the case, especially if we try to make the church seem like a spiritual hospital. Well, everybody that goes to the hospital is sick.
Absolutely.
So if the church is the hospital, then most of the people in there are sick. You got a few doctors and nurses there to try to, get you well. Mm-hmm. The pastors and the ministers are trying to get you well, but some of them sick too. Yes, But if that's the case, the church being the hospital, there are some sick people, and I ran into one, and so I started prostituting with my choir member at 15 years old. And so she not only introduced me to prostitution, she also got me hooked on drugs. And so from 15, 16, 17 years old, we did go back to the strip club, but it was really to get clients. So I'm stripping, I'm prostituting, I'm doing drugs, I'm selling drugs. I became an alcoholic. And if that wasn't bad enough, there was some porn stars that came into the nightclub that I was dancing in. And I went over there to say hey to them, because back then, before the internet, we had the famous porn stars on the DVDs and all the things. Like, it was separate. Now you open Instagram, porn, you open Facebook, everywhere. But everywhere, it's everywhere. But back in the day, it was secluded. You had your section for it. You had your time for that. And so it wasn't just out there. So there were select people, and these particular young ladies were very famous in what they did. So I just went to go say hey. And the conversation literally changed my life. And one of the young ladies, she looked at me and she said, have you ever thought about doing porn? And I was like, absolutely not. I'll leave that to you guys, But she said how much money she made from doing porn movies, and that's what caught my attention. And at 18 years old, while still a senior in high school, I started doing porn. My dad, he ended up beating me halfway to death with a wooden paddle and a belt buckle. He then tried to drown me that night. And I ended up having sex one time at 13 years old with a 27-year-old man that got me pregnant. Once I got in the strip club at 14, I realized how much of a little girl I really was. The church being the hospital, there are some sick people, and I ran into one. So I started prostituting with my choir member at 15 years old. You don't get to pick and choose how he used you.
What would be the one thing that you want someone to know? I'm Miles Brown, a leadership development and communication specialist. I'm also a minister of the gospel. Every day I help people share their stories. But pastors, they don't always get to tell their full journey, how they became who they are today. In this show, we dive into the good, the bad, the ugly, the ups, and the downs of becoming and being a pastor. This is how pastors are made, sharing the real stories of real pastors.